You're listening to mPress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Yeah, yeah. Join us next time on the next episode of mPress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.mpressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of mPress Conversations with Maggie. Today, my guest is LaChelle Barnett. LaChelle, welcome.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be chatting today.
Thank you. Glad to have you. It's an absolute pleasure. Tell our listening audience about your business, how you got started, and what it is that you do, please.
Yeah, sure. So I am a program consultant and I have both a nonprofit side and a for-profit side. And so essentially what we do is we show industry leaders, people who have been experts in their field for, some length of time, how to extract their expertise and then turn it into an education business, right? So for some people that is like a coaching business or a consulting business. Other people are more on the service provider side, but they have a coaching arm. So it looks a lot of different ways, but essentially I help people extract their expertise and turn it into an asset that is then sellable, right? That's the short version of what we do in our company.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you also work with e-commerce businesses, or is it primarily service-based?
I do not. I stay in my own lane, and the only people that I serve are people who want to extract their expertise. So, and service providers. So I have a fair amount of accountants and lawyers and copywriters, right, which technically don't have, they're doing more of a service, but I service those people who want to change their business model. Essentially, it's like I'm doing a lot of done for you work and I want to do more coaching consulting work. So you're either a coach or a consultant, or you're a service provider building a coaching consulting arm.
What does your ideal client look like? Is it typically someone who's already been established in their business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So typically the two most common things that we love in terms of working with people, number one is someone who feels very called to the work that they do. Right. So typically this is the people who have visions and dreams and passions but they're bigger. Right. It's like we don't really have a lot of clients that are more on the side hustle side. Nothing wrong with that. But typically the clients that we serve and the people that we enjoy the most are people who are like, listen, I got this big old dream and this big old vision, and I need to figure out how to, lay it out and actually bring it to life. So if you're that person, then you're definitely going to be a great person for our camp. And then the other thing I would say is having a certain level of experience business wise, right? So here's a good example. I have a fair amount of therapists who are clients, partly because I'm a licensed therapist by trade, so I naturally attract therapists. And so we do service therapists, right? Some of them are in private practice, right? And so they have that level of business expertise, but they're starting a whole new business in this coaching consulting space, right? So we love people who have some level of experience, whether it's previous business that you've done. We do have people who come straight from employee, but it tends to be a bit of a harder track for people who have zero business experience.
Got it. Wow, that's a lot. Tell us what led you through this path of being that coach to help bring out, people's expertise.
Yeah, so probably two things. So number one, when I got into entrepreneurship, so I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship was never the goal. I did not grow up around entrepreneurs. I did not want to be an entrepreneur. Like I know some people always have, it's like, no, I'm not a risk taker by nature. I like certainty, and entrepreneurship is none of that. Right. So it was definitely a God plan and not a me plan. But there's some things that happened personally in my life with my son, where he moved across the country with his dad. And as a result of that, I quit my job because I was getting ready. I live in Indiana. They were moving to Texas. And I was working as a licensed therapist at the time. And I'm like, oh no, if my son is moving, I'm moving. That's too far. He's on the spectrum. There's lots of things to talk about there. But essentially, it caused me to quit my job and decide I was going to move across the country and just do therapy there. I wasn't planning on getting into entrepreneurship, but it was my first exposure to entrepreneurship was probably, I don't know, 6 years ago at this point, which kind of became the catalyst where I started to dip my toe into oh, what is coaching and what's this online this and right, like just exposure to a whole new world, which is what got me into this place. And so initially, our focus was much more around how do you identify your purpose and things that I could easily translate from a therapist perspective. But what really solidified the current positioning that we have in our business and what we're building our entire brand around is this idea of being really good at what you do,
Mm,
right? As a culture consultant, the longer you're in this industry, the more you see both the amazing benefits of being able to hop on social media and get clients and all the coach hurt and the wasted money. And right. So it's this very interesting dynamic. And so I also had my own experience where I created a program and launched the program, made six figures from the program, but the clients in there did not get the results that I was hoping for.
oh,
Right. They were very appreciative and, no one was complaining. We didn't have, a bunch of problems, but internally I was like, something feels off. It doesn't feel actually that great to make. I mean, making money always feels good. Okay. But it doesn't feel that great to make a bunch of money, but then not get I'm a therapist at heart, right? Like the whole goal is to be serving people. And so I shut the program down. I did a little bit of figuring out. I kind of sat with myself because the question that I was kind of asking is, well, why didn't it work? Especially with the level of expertise that I have, right? I've got multiple degrees, lots of experience with serving people, but more than that, I've also taught undergraduate, graduate students. Like I have a fair amount of experience as it relates to teaching, right? Therapists should be the ones that are the most likely to, step into the role. So how is this such a challenge, right? And so I spent probably a year trying to uncover what is it, the teaching? Is it me? Is it the client? Like just kind of sorting through. And as a result of that, I got exposed to a whole group of people, right, who are in a very similar space where they've done multiple beta rounds of their program or, right, all of these different things that were program related. And it's like, oh, this is the thing that I could spend the rest of my life doing, both on the for profit side, which is all the coaching industry stuff. But on the nonprofit side, we help them build evidence based programs, which is a whole nother thing. But our entire platform is around programs because I think people underestimate how difficult it is to actually translate what you've known for 20 years into a whole nother human in a way that they get a actual result. And if you're in the coaching industry, people are paying you for a result, whether we like that or don't like that. Like we tend to have a lot of people who struggle with, tangible results. But essentially that's how I got here is by my own flaw and my own, mistake and figuring taking a time to figure out, oh, this is okay, I get. Oh, okay, now I understand. So that was my long version.
LaChelle, that was such a great journey you took us through. So, in your opinion, looking back,
Mhm,
even though you made six figures, which is fantastic,
mhm.
would you consider that program a failure or a success? Because your own, to use your words, you
Mhm,
said even though your clients paid, nobody was complaining, but
mhm,
within yourself, you felt it wasn't a success. So, would
mhm.
you consider that a failure? But you made money from it.
Yeah, so I think this is a great conversation, and it has everything to do with how you define failure and success,
Exactly.
right? So for me, the program was a failure, not me, right? It's
Exactly.
like I think this is a thing that is easy to get mixed up when you're the face of the brand and the product is essentially you
Mm,
and your expertise. It can easily feel like you failed, and it's like, well, no, I'm still amazing. Just so we're clear, like I
yes.
my worth is not connected to this program, right? But at the end of the day, I also need to be honest that the program was a failure, right? The
Mhm,
program did not do what I wanted it to do, right?
mhm.
What I had in my mind for it to do. So, yeah, the program definitely was a failure, but I would not count me or the business or, some of these other bigger generalizations as a failure.
So let's talk about then how did you go back to the drawing board and rewrite another program or work?
Yeah, so all kinds of things. Mostly
Do
a
tell.
lot of research, right? There's a lot
Okay.
of me looking at, well, when I was teaching the undergrad students and when I was teaching my graduate students, what was working, right? What did I, because really at the end of the day, for me personally, it might be different for someone else who does not have a teaching background, who does
Okay.
not have a therapist background. So I'll kind of address that too. But for me, it was a lack of carrying over skills, right? It was me listening to too many people in the coaching industry and taking their word over my own internal, um, dialogue, right? Because in the coaching industry, there's a lot of faster, better, higher, right? And it's like, well, there was so much of me saying, well, actually, I don't like this whole idea of sell it first and then create it later. That actually doesn't feel. But you know what? They're the expert. They're making millions of dollars. Maybe I should be honoring that. And it was, for me, it was a lack of honoring what I already knew and trying to move too fast, right? And I think that if you don't come from a teaching background or if you don't come from a coaching background, then the issue essentially is not really understanding that being good at your craft is not the same thing as being able to teach your craft, right? I might be a fantastic lawyer. It doesn't mean that I would be great at teaching other people to become a lawyer,
Yes.
right? I think people misunderstand. If we just be honest, most experts have a lot of ego, right? If I've spent a decade in my own industry, let
Yes.
alone multiple decades, then I kind of feel like I know my stuff,
Yes.
right? And so it would be natural to come in confident and feeling like, well, I could definitely, take what I've done. And it's like, it's only on the other side of doing it oftentimes that people are like, well, it turns out that it wasn't as easy as I had in
Got
my
it.
mind, right?
Exactly.
I
Yes.
think the biggest difference is understanding that being a beast at your craft is not the same thing as being a beast at program design and actually being able to translate it into something that someone can actually implement.
There has to be a certain level of skill in being a coach to be able to pull out what you just said in terms of someone's expertise,
Mhm.
because oftentimes you don't really see what's right in front of you, so
Mhm.
having that gift to actually listen first
Mhm.
of all and just pull out, oh, you could make a business out of this, you're already doing this, you're
Mhm.
good at this, look at the results that you'll have. Do you map it? Talk to us through that journey of how you work with your clients.
Yeah, so we always start by kind of stepping back and taking a bigger picture because one of the things that I also find common in the industry is that people tend to be in a cyclical some kind of cycle that isn't creating momentum, right?
Mm.
Which is like they're either at an income plateau or it's not moving. Like there's just an interesting dynamic that I've observed. And so we kind of zoom out first and start talking about the big picture. What's the destination? Like where are we trying to go? What's the objective here? Because everybody's building a different kind of business. Someone wants to build a multi-million-dollar business, or somebody else just wants to, be paying their bills and not having quite the same size of business. Again, most of my clients have big dreams, but that can look a lot of different ways. And so our first step is always about what is the destination and what is the objective, right? And so once we're clear, it's like, okay, I really want to help, blah blah blah. So the question for people who are listening is, well, what's the change that you're seeking to make in the world? Right?
Mm.
What's the thing that you would love to have on your grave that says, oh, she helped the world do this, improve this, stop this, whatever. And then from there, we can say, okay, what's the path for us to get there? Like, how do we chart the path? And where's the gap? Right? Because typically there's a level of information that you already know, right?
Yes.
And there's a place that. So let me just use a more concrete example. So let's say that one of the things that I really want to do is be a relationship coach. Okay. And I have this wild idea to decrease the divorce rate, right? Because again, our people are like, let's change the world. And I'm like, all right, well, that's a big goal. Let's talk about how we're gonna do that. So then it's like we have to take this is the ultimate goal, but there's 92 steps to do
Together.
it,
Yes.
right? And a lot of it, and this is the place where I find that people struggle the most, is that in order to, I wish I could just say this a bit more succinctly, but it's like, even though you're trying to create a movement, right? You're trying to impact millions, you're trying to impact thousands, whatever your goal is, you don't start there. You start with this group of people, right? It's like, all right, if I want to help married couples stay married, I got a lot of choices. Do I start with newlyweds? Do I start with people in relationships? Do I start with the people who have been married for 20 years and are on the verge? Like, you can't group those people together because what they need is different. The process that you have to take them through is different, right? And so I think the biggest part, just to, kind of sum it up, is being really clear about where you're trying to go and
Yes.
understanding here's where I'm going to start, right?
Yes.
And having the patience, right, to understand that this is not sometimes we have a lot of short-term thinking in business because we need to make money, which is a very real thing. right? It's like, yeah, but you need to balance the short-term thinking with the long-term thinking. It's like, this is the right now plan, the next 12-month plan. This is the 10-year plan.
That's really, really good. You know, to quote the late great poet of our time, Biggie Smalls, and he said, more power, more problems. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you just said it so perfectly, you know, you want to change the world. And, you know, what does that look like? You think you want to have millions of dollars, but you don't sleep at night because you're worried about this, you're worried about that. There's always that fine line that you have to balance in order to have a healthy work-life balance. With everything that you got going on, do you have a team to where you're able to work through this? How did you go about building your team? Let's talk about that.
Listen, the team conversation is a whole podcast within itself, honey, because again, what we don't often understand as business owners is that these are all different skill sets.
Yes.
Marketing is a skill set, leadership with your team is a skill set, right? Like we all come in with our craft
Yes.
skill set, but we don't necessarily have sales skill set or marketing skill set. So one thing that I was not strong in is leadership skills. I mean,
Mm,
you know, leadership from the perspective of leading myself, right? And I've had a lot of leadership roles in my 9 to 5. Like as a therapist, I supervise other therapists, but it is very different to be in a supervisory role with another therapist and helping them with more clinical kinds of challenges,
mm,
and to have a team, right? Whether I've had coaches on my team, I've had people who do more direct stuff like video editing and things that are that nature. And I will tell you that team is one of those things that I find that a lot of us as coaches steer away from because it's hard,
it is
right?
hard. It
It's
is.
like, ooh, it's like, oh, I didn't, ooh. But the challenge is when you don't build a team, the ability to have real freedom is very limited. Like
Very.
most of us got into this for freedom. Some of it is money, right? But mostly it's either impact, freedom, right? Like there's only a couple of ways to get freedom. You either are heavily automated, right, which comes with its own set of challenges, ups and
Yes.
downs, right,
Yes.
or you have a team, right?
Yes.
Because I think that the thing that I would just love for people to kind of just sit with is you can't say that you want to impact thousands of people, millions of people, and not be willing to hire.
Mm,
Like, is there a version somewhere where you could build $1 million business without a team? 100%. You can 100% build a business like that makes a lot of money without a big team. But the question is, right,
yeah.
like how much freedom do you have in that business? How much do you enjoy that business? And how much impact do you have in that business? Right? Because I've had clients who they have 100 now. This is much more rare in the current climate, but I've
Yes.
had clients who built $1 million business off of a $200 product,
Mm,
right? And so they didn't have a big team and but they did make a lot of money. But the impact is the part that they didn't feel fulfilled in, right? Because how much can you impact somebody with a $200 product?
there you
So,
go.
so I think that's the context that I would give is that as hard as building a team has been for me, and I think the largest that we've had is up to 7 people on our team, right? Um, it still feels worth it. It just means that I have to step into it, learn the skills, give myself permission to make some mistakes, but it is a non-negotiable for where it is that we're trying to go. And so yes, we have a team. Some of them are more coaching and on the delivery side. Some of them are a bit more tactical and technical, right? But there's no way that I'm getting ready to do all of this work by myself. That's for somebody else. That's not my vision.
I know that's right. And you know, a lot of times women, excuse me, we will sacrifice a lot of our own health, our time, 20-hour days. I mean, just not taking care of our own
Yes,
health.
ma'am.
It is not a healthy life work balance. It is not at all. And while it's nice to have the bag and have a nice balance in the bank, you got to realize what you're giving up in order to have those things. So I applaud you for actually realizing, no, I can't do this by myself. I need help. So
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
you. Absolutely. So tell us, LaChelle, where can our audience find you? How can people contact you? How can people work with you? Let's start there first.
Yeah, so if you are someone who is considering building a course, a class, a coaching program, curriculum, consulting, anything that's in that kind of education space, then we would definitely love to support you. We basically have three camps of people, right? Like there are the people who are considering and they haven't officially decided. Then there are people who are like, yes, I want to, I just need to know how to get started, right? There are the people who have done it and it's just not working. And so maybe perhaps there are four groups. That first group we don't talk to quite as much, right? So that third group is the group of people who are the person that I explained, where they've kind of done it a couple of times, but it just isn't clicking. And you
Yeah.
know it's not clicking because the enrollment isn't easy. You don't actually have the ability to scale it, right? So that's the second. And then the last group that we work with is the people who actually are trying to scale a program. So if you are in that cap, then we would love to have you. And the easiest way to find me is Facebook. Right. So that is the primary platform that I operate on. And so my profile is public. You can browse and just kind of, oh, this is what she talks about. I like her. I don't like her. And then you can DM me whatever questions, that you have. Once we have our updated website, you'll be able to just see it right on my profile where it's like, okay, here's where you can go to find but Facebook is where you would find all that information.
And that is LaChelle Barnett.
Correct.
Perfect. So one of the things that I gotta ask you is, as you work with that third bucket of people that are wanting to work with you and your services, what is the number one common denominator that each one of them complain about?
The number one thing, and these are is this the group of people that are scaling or the people who have built a program that isn't working?
A program that isn't working. Yes.
Yeah. So this one is tricky because people they aren't often able to articulate the problem. So they don't typically come in saying, man, I'm really struggling with this, right? It's like they're typically struggling with, maybe it's me. They have a little bit of imposter syndrome that they didn't necessarily have a year or two ago. Or maybe it's the clients, right? Like they're not doing what it is that they're supposed to do, right? Or maybe it's my curriculum. So they don't typically know what the problem is. I would start there. The one thing that they are typically aware of is this is just not doing what I need it to do. Like this isn't actually scalable. How do I get it to be a program that is more evergreen, meaning I can offer it multiple times. I might launch, I might not launch, right? But essentially when your program isn't scalable, meaning it requires, here's what I would say. People are joining your program because of you. Right? They like your personality. They feel like they can trust you.
Yes.
But you actually want people to love the program, not just you. Right? One of the things that we do is program audits for people who are in that bracket. Right? People who have created a program and it's just not doing it. So that way we talk to your clients, right? Because things that they won't tell you that they will tell me, right? We have all of the kind of things in place to help you really audit. So because part of the challenge with that particular group is I don't even know if I have the capacity to be redoing a whole nother program, right? And it's like, well, when you do the audit, you don't have to redo the entire program. You understand what the problem is and you get to pinpoint the specific problem. But I think that group of people tends to be the one that has a lot of ego. So they tend to be in the background struggling, not necessarily in the forefront, right?
Okay.
They're not usually, publicly talking about as many clients as they would like. They tend to be more of because I think this is the biggest indicator. When you're not selling your program, that is a sign to you and literally to the world that there's something about this program that isn't doing what you need to do, right? Because we don't sell. Most of my clients have high integrity, right? They have this little voice in them that really wants to serve people well, and when they feel like they're not quite doing that, it keeps them from actually selling the program.
Wow. And that right there, if your company is it's not sustainable, you just have an expensive hobby, right? Because at that point, what's the purpose? What are we doing here? What would be the problem then for people who are scaling on the flip side? Because we just talked about for people who are not. So what is the number one common denominator that most of them are challenged with the people that are scaling that you work with?
Yeah, so I would say profitability because the profit margins change, right? So there's a difference between a 10-person program, right, versus a 400. I think the largest we've had from a client perspective is 400 people in a group. Those are worlds away, right? And how you manage the profit margin right? You're starting to hire coaches, and
Yes.
it's worlds away from, I think the biggest difference is how do I manage still being profitable with this program as I scale? That is probably the most common thing that we are working through. There's always some logistical kind of things that we change structurally, right? Because what you might do, like let's just say your program is Q&A calls. Well, how you run a Q&A call with 20 people and 200 people is different. So there are always things that we're tweaking about the program itself. But by the time someone is actually scaling with us, we don't actually take anyone in our scaling offer, which is called our $1 million curriculum program. We don't take anyone in that program who doesn't already have a proven track record in this program. That's the difference. You probably have a proven track record as a person. That's not what we're talking about. You have to have a program that actually works for you to be in this program, because we're not doing the fundamental foundational kind of curriculum design stuff in this program. The program also has to already have at least an 80% success rate. If it doesn't, you can't be in this program. You need to actually focus on improving the program first, because I think the thing that we get wrong in entrepreneurship is that we're like, my coach used to call it hustling backwards, right? Which is essentially
Hustling backwards. Okay.
yeah, he used to say this all the time. And it's essentially, what's the number one thing that makes people buy from you, right? What's the number one thing that creates easy sales, right? It's like, well, it's authority, right? When people believe that you can actually help them do the thing, solve the problem that they're looking to solve, then they're going to say yes to you, right? And it's like, well, how do you build authority? Results. Right? It's like, yes, education is authority. Being featured in the media is authority. Writing a book is authority.
Yes.
But if you line up the 9 ways that you can build authority, and you had to choose, you put 10 of your prospects and say, you can only have one. I only have one of these, right? Which one would you choose? Every single time it's going to be results.
Mm.
It's not going to be any of these other ways that you can also build authority, right? And so what I find is that when he says hustling backwards was in a different context, but I like it as it relates to what we do. It's like, well, if you just got better results with your clients, you wouldn't need to market so much. Like there's a compound effect related to authority. So anyway, that wasn't directly the question that you asked me, but I would say my scaling people are definitely more on the profit margin kind of side.
Still a very good problem to have. I mean, you're talking about scaling, and that's what every successful business person wants to deal with is profit, obviously.
Yeah.
That's really, I got stuck on the hustling backwards road trip that we took on here. I really like that scenario and how your coach kind of broke that down. So now in your business, what has been, or is somebody who's listening right now, what advice would you give an entrepreneur who's in this business and has just plateaued? What advice would you give someone who is either like, I've been doing this for 10 years and nothing's changed. I could do this in my sleep. It doesn't get them fired up anymore as it did in that first to 5 years of their business. What would you say to either continue, or would you just say scrap it and move on to something else?
Yeah, so this is a very personal decision. Let's just start there, right? What I might do and what they might do, right? So I think the thing that I would encourage, and I'm always encouraging people to do, because we have a similar crowd where they're later in life, right?
Yes.
And we call them like late specializers. It's being really honest with yourself about the results that you're getting in your life.
Okay.
Right? And really examining, what are my deepest desires? If I wasn't lying to myself, if I wasn't afraid, if I wasn't trying to figure out the how, because the how is what trips us up. If we can't figure out the how, we almost kind of default to, let's just keep it the way it's been. But it's like, if you removed everything and you just tapped into your deepest desires, what is that?
Yes.
Right? What's the thing that you deeply desire? And then how far are you from that thing? Right? What is the desire, and what is the data telling you? Those are the two things we tell our clients all the time. It's like, desire is very important. Like, you have to be really clear. It's like, well, I don't desire to have maybe I came in wanting a big business and now I don't, right? Or maybe I didn't come in wanting a big business and now I do. The question is the desire, or how you might answer that question is it based on trauma? Right? Because one of the things that we talk about in our camp, and it's just because I'm a therapist, right?
Right.
Is entrepreneur trauma. It's like, I see my clients lying to themselves all the time about what they desire because something went wrong. And it's like if the launch failed, or if the business partner stole something, or if I got a charge back, or whatever negative thing has happened, what's like, oh, I don't want that no more. And it's like, oh, okay. But if you lie to yourself, you'll never get it. So we got to start with just being honest with you, right? And not letting the trauma change us.
Yes.
Right? I think it's a good place to start when you're in that space of, I'm not really sure. It's like, well, what is the deepest desires? How do you tap into that? How do you remove the fear? Right? And then what are the results that you're getting as it relates to that? If I say that I want to lose, a bunch of weight, but my actions aren't lining up with that. If I say I want to build a big business, if I say I want to get married, I have my own revelation about that. Like, I'm like, I tell people all the time that I want to get married. I'm single, just in case y'all listening, y'all,
Put it out there.
I'm single, right? And so what I caught myself doing at the end of last year, the end of last year, was people would ask like, oh, do you want to get married? And I'm like, yeah. And so verbally, yes, I'm saying it, but none of my actions are lined up with getting married. I'm not doing nothing related. I'm not on no dating sites. I don't leave my house because I work from home. Like, and it's like, well, LaChelle, you saying you want this.
Yeah.
But in reality, so that's what I would say. Desire and data is a great place to start.
That's so good, and such a good example as well. Mm-hmm. So for the entrepreneur who's midlife and starts thinking about legacy, right? Because at some point we got to, I want to retire, I want a nest egg, I want all of these things, and the desire has changed. How does that now impact the business?
Yeah. So one, what does legacy mean to you? Because it's different to each person, right?
Yes.
Some people, legacy is around what they input into their grandkids, right? For another person, legacy is their name on billboards. So you really want to get a clear definition of what legacy means to you, right? And not let what other people's definition of legacy impact you, because that's common, right? I heard a TikTok video of Oprah talking to somebody, and I think it was Trevor Noah, and he basically said, you interviewed all these people, right? You've learned all these things, right? How do people get to where they want to be? And she said, well, people get to where they want to be because they know where they want to be. She said, most people they're lying to themselves. And she didn't say it this way. I'm using the word lying to yourself, right? But she said, basically, more times than not, other people, all these other influences are impacting your ability to be honest and be clear about where it is that you want to be, right? And so I think step one is really being able to say, all right, where am I at right now? Like, how do I get real honest with where I'm at and where I want to be? Yes. Right? And I think that sometimes we just kind of get off track and we trying to, we're not clear about the direction that we want to go, right? I'm sorry, I lost your question in the midst of me trying to talk.
No, you're good. I was just asking about the impact of legacy and
So one is being clear about what legacy means to you. And then I think identifying it is one thing, but accepting it is another thing, right? Because there's a lot of times I find people wrestling, right? Because it's like, well, the world says I should make a bunch of money, but I really just want to be with my grandkids. And it's like, oh, well, we need to settle that internal conflict within yourself, because you're going to keep coming out here and doing business stuff and doing this and doing that, when really this is the desire. So awareness, acceptance, right?
Right.
And the last thing that I would just say is that, let's just say that your definition of legacy is still big, right? Let's just say it's like, I've wrestled with it, I've gotten clear, I've accepted it. I think the biggest thing that I would say is that you got to get real strategic and real intentional, because you don't know how much time you have. Building legacy takes a long time, right? It's like, and I find that people are very unfocused. They are all over the place in terms of, it's like we're doing a lot. We're busy, right? We're making 20 steps, right? But we're making 20 steps in 20 directions instead of 20 steps in one direction.
That's so good.
So it's like, once you're clear about whatever legacy means to you, then you need to chart a strategic, intentional path, not a perfect path, right? You need to be directionally correct, right? It's not about doing exactly. It's like, no, I know that all of these steps are leading to this thing. And I find that people are just very unfocused and therefore have a lot of ideas and they're all over the place. And it's like, well, legacy demands excellence.
It
You
does.
don't have the luxury of taking 20 steps in 20 different directions. You're almost taking for granted time, money, and like these are resources that are not unlimited. You don't have unlimited time or unlimited money or unlimited energy. And so if whatever legacy means to you, you need to be moving intentionally towards that.
Very good, LaChelle. Very good. As we wrap up, what are your final thoughts or message that you'd like our listening audience to know about you?
Oh, know about me. Okay. I have no idea. What would you? So I would say I love Jesus. So if you're gonna come over here, we're gonna talk a little about. We're gonna talk about it a lot because this is business. I want to get some work done, right? But
Yeah.
just know there are gonna be some. Come on now, some black colloquiums I might call them. Right? We're gonna talk about. I am a cusser too. Sometimes people don't. How you love Jesus? Well, I'm not gonna cuss at you. Like I'm not gonna disrespect you, but you are gonna hear a cuss word over it because that's part of our camp too, right? I like to tell people up front because that's not everybody's preference, right? Um, I would also say that I am very left brain, right? That's part of the reason why I'm in the curriculum design, program design
Mhm.
space. A lot of my clients are creatives, right?
Yes.
They're
Yes.
intuitive and they got ideas and
Yes.
and it's like, well, those are the people who need logic the most because
Yes.
they're not creating momentum, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I might add is that that's why I have all these books because I read every day. I research. I am the person that can sit here for 4 hours and do the same thing, right?
Wow.
Where most people cannot do that. Um, and so know that is kind of those are the things that we bring to the table, right? Like, I mean, we could go into accolades and degrees, but what most matters most from my perspective is, do we have the ability? Like, is this going to be a good coaching relationship,
Mm.
right? Like, sometimes I find that you could be a great person, but I don't want to be coached by you, right? Like, this is not personal, right? This is business.
Yeah,
Right?
it
So
is.
those are just a couple of things that I think are, kind of quirky, fun things to consider as you enter into this world. I also am a big doodler, right? And so when I teach, I'm very visual. So if you happen to be a visual person, then, this would be a good camp for you too.
That is wonderful. Again, our audience can find you on Facebook at LaChelle Barnett.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pure pleasure.
You're listening to mPress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Impress. Join us next time on the next episode of mPress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.mpressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.